Good afternoon. We thank you all for being here. We thought it was appropriate for us to gather after a long day of debate to at least get the public a chance to hear our positions on this bill, this alleged critical race theory bill, even though nowhere in the short title does it say that. What we're concerned is that they passed legislation today that censors our teachers and our students in their ability to teach history and their ability to learn actual and factual history. And so that's why we were so strong in our opposition today. We were protecting the rights of the children and the teachers and the people of the state of Mississippi, and we'll continue to do that. I'm going to yield before we take questions to our first speaker, Mr. Otis, Reverend Otis Anthony, and then we'll hear from the senior gentleman from Forest, Mr. Percy Watson. So I'll yield to Reverend Anthony at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. One of the things that we were gravely concerned about was how this further divides us. This state, through its leadership, the Speaker of the House and Lieutenant Governor 2 years ago, we made history by changing the state's flag. And with this piece of legislation, we just believe that it further puts us back than brings us together. We want to make sure that our history is told correctly, truthfully, and it doesn't handcuff our teachers from teaching that. And we just believe that this is a bad piece of legislation. Not only is this bad, but in years to come, we believe that something behind this is going to come that's going to further divide this great state. And that's where we are on it. It's not a good piece of legislation. Bad bill. It's bad for the state of Mississippi.
Can you say your first and last name, please?
Otis Anthony, O-T-I-S, last name Anthony.
Oh, yeah.
Good evening, everyone. After experiencing the longest debate on any legislation that I have seen since being a member of this body, I feel that this is a situation where the legislation may have passed, but the bill in the end should be dead. There is still considerable mystery surrounding a bill that has apparently been introduced in 35 states in this country. No one really knows exactly what it's going to do, but it seems to be an indication that Mississippi is moving backward after we took several steps forward in changing and removing the flag. No one can really explain critical CRT. Nobody can really fully say what the impact it would have on public education, on higher education. So it was necessary for the black members to raise this bill as being very, very dangerous and perhaps very injurious to public education. And we just commend, I commend my colleagues of the Democratic Caucus and the Mississippi Legislative Caucus for their vocal opposition to this bill.
Can you say your first and last name too, please?
Percy Watson, W-A-T-S-O-N. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions?
If the governor signs this into law, would y'all consider any legal challenges to this?
We're looking at that. Well, we will spend some time talking to people who have the means and the resources, who are willing and offer to help us. And so that's one of the avenues we'll explore. But we certainly, the fight won't stop with the governor signing the bill. We'll continue to push the issue on this legislation. Is that it?
I mean, whenever this was passed in the Senate, y'all decided, I mean, there were black legislators that just walked out and weren't even a part of the vote. You know, what's your feelings right now?
Well, we're legislators. We are elected. People elected us and chose us, and to a certain extent empowered us to come here and do work. Our work is on the floor of that house. We were not walking out. We were going to stand there, we were going to fight, and as the gentleman from Forest said, Mr. Watson, the longest debate in his almost 40 years in the legislature, the longest debate he's seen on the floor of the House. But that's our job. And we thought that it was important to say what we had to say. We think that no matter how people voted, that we touch minds and hearts today, and people know what the truth is about this bill and what the dangers are about this bill. And they may vote for it, but they know that they've made a mistake, and that was our job to make that happen. And that's going to help us going forward. If we ever have a chance to overturn this law, today was the day where we laid the first groundwork to get that done.
Representative Johnson, do you expect possibly to have any conversation with Governor Reeves before he sees this bill?
No, I don't. I don't expect to have any. But somebody here may, but not me. No.
As some of y'all suggested, after the legislature voted to change the flag, it was almost this feeling of maybe a new chapter, or, better working relations. Where do you go from here? I mean,
It was a new chapter. It is a new chapter. Better working relations. But we still serve in a body of people who are elected, and they're politicians. And sometimes they're subject to the whims of small, loud vocal, far right, extreme factions. And sometimes they're susceptible to that, and we understand that. But we took a step back today, a couple of steps back, and it is not good. It's going to undo things that have been done. We'll continue to work together. We'll continue to talk. But part of that conversation will be, what can we do to fix this? And we hope that we get some mileage out of that.
You said normally you're not seen at the podium, like speaking. Can you just talk about overall, like your emotions, how you're feeling right now?
No, I'm at the podium all the time. Well, I usually don't go to the podium after we've heard the powerful deliveries that we've heard today. There was really not a whole lot to say, but the important dynamic was that everybody said something. And we had a long line of people, and I think that speaks. There are people who never go to the podium. There are people who don't look to get in front of that mic, but they felt strongly enough about this today, and they understood the importance of it today. And that kind of unity, that kind of strength, that kind of resolve is why we're gonna, at the end, win the day. May not be today, may not be tomorrow, but when we have this kind of unity and this kind of resolve, it encourages me. In a lot of ways, this is why it was a great day, because we stood together, we stood powerfully together.
I know it was mentioned on the floor a lot in some of those remarks about what this would do to teachers and to students who, as was said earlier, might be handcuffed by this legislation. What do you think this is going to do to education in Mississippi, in the teaching of history, and how students are able to communicate with each other and with teachers when it comes to things of race and gender and religion, the things that were mentioned in the bill?
Well, I know all of you have been watching the national news, and you've seen some of these school board meetings where people just wildly get up and make accusations about what's being taught. That doesn't have to happen but once. You may not have but two people in a community that do that, but when it happens, some teachers, some principals are going to say, well, maybe we shouldn't teach that. Maybe we can't teach that. Maybe that offends somebody. And that's the danger of this. You don't need but one loud, vocal, irresponsible person to do that to a school board, and that changes the dynamic of how history is taught in that school system and probably around the state. And that's why we have to be vigilant. We're not going to stop today. We're going to have far more input and debates, and we're going to be talking to the Department of Education and lawyers about what we can do.